Actually, I was going to talk about the 7 cool things about having an accent. I'm glad I wasn't part of that satra. I think I would have totally lost that battle. But the point is, we all speak a little differently. We all speak in different languages. And today I'm going to be speaking on behalf of those individuals who don't have the ability to come up here and speak, but who nevertheless have very important lessons for all of us that we must all pay attention to. And of course I'm talking about animals. You know, children, they seem to have a natural fascination for animals. I know that I did when I was younger. I wanted to read all about them. I wanted to watch them. I wanted to know all about them. But as a society, instead of encouraging that natural respect and awe that many children have for animals, we instead tell them that it's okay to cut their bodies apart and to eat them and to wear them. Or that putting them in cages for their entire lives so that we can gawk at them for 5 seconds in a zoo, well, that's an okay thing to do. Or cutting open their bodies in classroom experiments, that's okay. But there are some animals that we encourage compassion for. Dogs, for example, as we just heard. But how do we decide which animals they are? Which ones deserve our respect and which ones do we abuse? You know, research in animal intelligence is now busting myths. Harish was up here earlier. He was busting myths about what people think about gay people. And research in animal intelligence is now busting myths about animals. So research in animal intelligence now tells us that pigs can be regarded as smarter than dogs, or that chickens have cognitive abilities that are comparable to those of cats, dogs, and even certain primates. So which animal do we call a friend, and which animal do we call dinner? How are we deciding that? Here in India, some people eat chickens. Well, somewhere else they eat dogs. So I asked myself this question later on in life because even though I admired animals when I was younger, I was told that you're supposed to eat them and you're supposed to wear them, and that's what I did. But when I asked myself this question later on in life, I could no longer justify doing that, and I had to stop those practices, and I had to go vegan. Jeremy Bentham is a philosopher who passed away in the 1800s. And this is what he had to say about our treatment of animals. He said, it's not about whether they can talk or whether they can reason. It's about whether they suffer. And I agree with that. It is only about whether they can suffer. That's the only thing that should determine how we treat them. But it's not the 1800s anymore. And today we know that animals do reason and they also do talk. So, once upon a time, it was thought that only humans communicated through gestures. Well, only humans and primates, I should say. But now we know that ravens, too, use their wings and their beaks much in the same way that we use our arms or our fingers to point at an object. And we know that chickens have 30 different vocalizations to distinguish just between if a predator is arriving over land or is arriving over water. And we know that parrots can draw conclusions from the presence of clues as well as the absence of clues. This is a reasoning ability that was acknowledged only in humans and apes once upon a time. And I use the word acknowledged because we humans are a very pompous bunch. We make these claims claims about traits that are human and human alone, and it's not based on any science or any fact whatsoever. And it's this very pompousness that allows us to cram chickens who are used for eggs, a product we don't even need and that's not even good for us, in a cage their entire lives that's as big as a sheet of notepad paper or your iPad screen. That's all they have. They can't even spread a wing. And it's this very pompousness, which is why even the study of animal intelligence is a relatively new field. Because if we start to acknowledge that animals are not so different from us, then we have to seriously question what we do to animals today. But we are learning. And now we know that chimpanzees are capable of empathy, altruism, and self-awareness. We know that dolphins call each other by name. They have signature whistles for each other that are unique to every dolphin. We know that elephants can recognize themselves in mirrors, or that octopi use tools. We even know that squirrels, they can be wily and deceptive. And just this week, there was a study that came out where scientists are now telling us that elephants actually show compassion for each other when times get tough. You know, they touch each other with their trunks, or they make sounds, you know, if things get scary or if there's a threat. It's sort of, I mean, it's the same thing as if a human were to go, shh, it's okay, it's okay. That's what elephants do to each other. They console each other. But, you know, all of this is a lot like people. But researchers at the University of Adelaide now tell us that animals can have cognitive faculties that are superior to that of people. So they say that humans, just because we don't have the same abilities as animals, we haven't recognized that as intelligence, just because we can't do it ourselves. So many animals, for example, leave scent marks in their surroundings. Humans don't have a good sense of smell. We don't even know what that means. But those olfactory markings likely have just as much information as what we see. This is what one of the professors working on this had to say. It's not about us having different levels of intelligence. It's different kinds. So now, equipped with the knowledge and understanding of animals' needs, their desires, we can make changes to respect animals' right to live a quality life free from pain and suffering. And this is already happening. So research involving animals is a problem because it hurts animals. I mean, it causes them pain and suffering, and for me, that's enough to say that that's a wrong thing to do. But it's also bad science because animals are not furry little humans. You know, they differ from us physiologically, anatomically, and so what happens in their bodies cannot accurately predict what will happen in a human's body. And that's why scientists are moving toward methods which are human-relevant and human-based. Have you all seen this before? There was a TED Talk on this thing. It's called an organ on a chip. It's made by Harvard's Weiss Institute. So they use cultured human cells, put them in a 3D model, and they have a heart chip, a liver chip, and so on. And they can string these chips together to create a human on a chip. So the TED Talk is by Geraldine Hamilton. You should check it out to understand exactly how it works. But it's fascinating. These chips can be used to better predict than animals human disease, how a drug will react in a human body, how a chemical may react in a human body, because it's human-based. You know, it's like using animals is like leaving your, accidentally, leaving your car keys on one street, but you're looking on a different street for those car keys. It's not even the same species. And there's a company called TEDxSITM, which has a skin model, which replicates the natural function of human skin, and it can predict whether a chemical will have an allergic reaction in a human body. And this replaces guinea pigs and mice who are injected with or had a chemical smeared onto their skin, like a cosmetic or a cleaner. The same company, TEDx, is making a non-animal model which can replicate the normal qualities of the human eye. And it can predict whether a substance will be toxic to the human eye or whether it may cause irritation. This is the common method currently used for testing that. It's called the Dray's test. And it literally involves dripping chemicals into a rabbit's eye and then seeing what happens. So this could be anything from a cosmetic like shampoo to drain cleaner to floor cleaner to God knows what. And you can imagine that it's very painful, and it causes everything from swelling to blindness. And then the rabbits are killed afterwards. 97% of medical schools in the US now no longer use animal laboratories to train their students. So this is a human patient simulator. And it can breathe, it can bleed, it can convulse, it can even die. And because it's based on the human body, it's been shown to teach students physiology and pharmacology better than the old-fashioned method, which was cutting up animals in the classroom. The food industry is changing as well. Right now, 6 million animals are killed every hour for food around the world. 6 million animals. The UN Environment Program has warned us that as we move to a population of 9.1 billion by 2050, diets heavy in meat and dairy are increasingly unsustainable. They say that moving toward a plant-based vegan diet is necessary to combat the worst effects of climate change, world hunger, fuel poverty, and so on. So in 2008, PETA US offered a $1 million incentive to the first scientist who could create chicken in a laboratory. That's chicken you can eat in a laboratory instead of through killing a chicken. It's called in vitro meat. And when PETA US came up with that idea, a lot of people laughed, a lot of people ridiculed us, even though in the 1930s, Winston Churchill had already thought of the idea, so maybe we're kind of far behind. But now, this in vitro meat science has absolutely exploded. Google co-founder Sergey Brin had funded the creation of the world's first in vitro beef burger. So that's a beef burger that was made in a laboratory instead of through killing a cow. And his funding helped get it to a point where it could actually be cooked and eaten as part of a trial. Now, it may seem strange to eat meat that was grown in a laboratory. But isn't it more strange to do that? I mean, isn't it more strange to take a living, breathing creature who wants to live just as much as you or I do and to kill him for 5 seconds of taste? And isn't it weird to destroy the planet? So the very object of this science is to create a a meat in the laboratory which is biologically identical to the meat one gets in the supermarket today. There's a fellow called Andras Forgax. He's the co-founder and the CEO of a company called Modern Meadow. It makes novel biomaterials. And in their laboratory, they're not only making in vitro meat, they're also making in vitro leather. So that's leather grown in a laboratory instead of through skin that's been pulled off of an animal. And the way this works is that they source cells from animals, and then they multiply them by the billions, and then they put them back together in the tissue precursor of meat and leather. And they're having great results in the laboratory, and things are looking very, very promising. And Forgax calls this victimless leather, because the victims of leather are the animals, but it's also people and the environment. So there's 400 leather tanneries surrounding the Ganges, and the treatment plant is insufficient to deal with all the waste. So you can see black waste being dumped straight into the Ganges. It's negatively affecting the endangered dolphins and the other marine life which are living within it, but also the people who use that water on a daily basis. There's been 36,000 farmers who've been put out of work in 2 districts of Tamil Nadu because of tannery pollution destroying their farmland. And people who live in and work in and live near leather tanneries have higher rates of cancer, respiratory problems, skin disease, and other such issues. But even today, nobody has to die for a bag, belt, or shoe. Fair enough, in vitro meats and leather are being worked on in the laboratory. And you also have innovative companies that are making plant-based, vegan, imitation meats, or non-dairy cheeses, or non-dairy milks, and so on. But all of this is just to satisfy a taste for meat and dairy. It's not that we need these products. Doctors tell us that we don't. So we can acknowledge that animals' feelings and animals' needs today, and we can stop eating meat today. And even though the synthetic leathers that one may find in the shops may not be biologically identical to leather, as what Forgax is working on in his laboratory, they still look and feel like leather. They still look the same. So we can stop buying leather today too. We can choose to buy products which are not tested on animals. And we can choose not to support forms of entertainment which deny animals the very basic right, the very basic freedoms. You know, we make our own futures. So looking ahead to 2050, they say that if we keep eating animals and keep growing at the rates that we are, we're going to be using 100 billion land animals every year for meat, for dairy, for eggs, for leather. And that's not even counting the sea life that we're absolutely decimating. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can use the knowledge that we have of animals, and we can make a different future. We can make a future in which animals and the environment are respected for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, and for many generations to come. So, I just want to leave you with this question. What are you going to do about it? Thanks a lot.